Good evening, everyone. Greetings from the President and members of Indian Medical Association Ponda branch and Chairman and Trustees of IMA Ponda Charitable Trust. Indian Medical Association has taken birth on 20th October 1974. And it was started by three luminaries, late Dr. Rajaram Babu Jayakar, Dr. Panduran Kamath Ghanekar and Dr. Keshav. And now soon, next year, 2024, we are entering into the Golden Jubilee year. So IMA Ponda is going to complete 50 years of its existence. IMA Ponda sapling has grown up into a full-grown tree with multidisciplinary functionaries. We have community health activities. We are undertaking continuing medical education programs not only for doctors but for paramedics, non-medical and for the community. Health awareness programs, general health and multidisciplinary care. In order to activate and to give better strength to our organization, we thought it is better to have a long-term committee. And when we are having such projects in hand, we thought the senior members who have already worked in the different areas at state level, national level and at the local level, we decided to form a charitable trust. Thereby, in the year 2005, we started IMA Ponda Charitable Trust. The reason being, we are in a better position to run the administration. Number two, the long-term standing committee and the senior members are better positioned to advise and guide the young generation doctors, and that's how our IMA Ponda has grown and we are functioning. Dilasa is a project, a palliative care center, which was started in the year 2018 and it became operational in the year 2019. At Dilasa, we give palliative care in terms of home visits, outpatient consultation, inpatient facilities, and we can accommodate as much as 25 inmates. Superintended by pharmacy with NDPS license to dispense narcotics. We have got ambulance services, palliative care physician, nurses, paramedics, and 24 hours doctors in call. Later on, IMA Ponda started Visawa, a Medi-assisted living center, a full-fledged facility for senior citizens with amenities to make their stay comfortable and homely. And Visawa has got a capacity of admitting 30. So this is how our two projects are. I am sure our distinguished guests who are here today, they have visited both our projects, and I know most of you who are present over here, we have also visited. IMA is fulfilling all the compliances, and we keep updated reports with transparency, and we have started realizing that multifactorial issues of geriatric population, their health problems of aging, social and psychological issues. That's how that prompted us to organize this year. It is for everyone. It is said we should be faithful to three specialists. One is a doctor. You have to tell the truth. If you don't tell the truth, diagnosis will be. You have to tell truth to your chartered accountant or tax consultant. And third is, you should be also faithful to your body. So, in geriatric care that we give, what we are doing is we are giving all the facilities with all the things in place. IMA takes pride in introducing the concept of palliative in Goa. Padma Shri Dr. Yama Rajagopal, the chairman of palliative care at KIPS Trivandrum, Dr. Geeta Joshi, ex-professor of anesthesiology and director of Gujarat Cancer, and Dr. Priyadarshini Kulkarni, ex CEO at Cipla Palliative Care Foundation, have been the guiding force for Dilasa. Dr. Rajinikanth SS Usnaukar Palliative Care Center. IMA Ponda Charitable Trust was formed to carry out community health activities at sustainable pace for smooth functioning and providing charitable services. Management of Dilasa are fully geared up to serve the global community requiring palliative care at all age groups of cancer and non-cancer. Most of the palliative care centers across the country cater for cancer, but there are very few which cater for cancer as well as non-cancer. Management groups serving old age homes and hospice the legal aspects, provide psychological support, protect their rights as regards their assets, and provide them comfort at hospitals. And when we admit a patient, we see that all things are full. I realized when we attended national conferences, international conferences, this growing concept of euthanasia, ethics, living will, do not necessitate order, are the upcoming challenges. And some of our patients who are admitted and their relatives, particularly few NRIs, they had a discussion with us and that prompted us to have this particular CME for the day, to more so to sensitize the community. Today, we are blessed with three great personalities who will share their views and experiences for this August gathering. We are delighted to present to you Dr. Ruth Bursahani, Consultant Neurologist at Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai, Honorable Justice Mahesh Sonar, High Court of Bombay and Goa, and Advocate Nitin Sardesai, Senior Advocate. Now may I request our members of IMA Ponda, the organizing committee, to escort the dignitaries on the days. I request President Dr. Dilip Borkar, President of IMA Ponda, Dr. Dilip Kirkar, to kindly escort our chief guest, Sri Mahesh Sonar. I request Chairman of IMA Ponda Charitable Trust to escort our speaker, Dr. Ruth Bursahani, to the dais, please. And request Dr. Rajaram Mantri, Secretary of IMA Ponda, to escort Advocate, Senior Advocate Nitin Sardesai. I request Dr. to kindly escort President of IMA Goa State, Dr. Mohan Devaskar, on the dais, please. I request Dr. Shweta to kindly escort the IMA Goa State Secretary, Dr. Sandeep Naik, to the dais, please.
May I now request Dr. Dilip Kirkar, President of IMA Ponda, to welcome the gathering.
Very good evening to all of you. It is indeed a proud moment for me to welcome all of you for this community sensitization program on euthanasia, ethics and living with. It is a pioneering effort of IMA Ponda and IMA Ponda Charitable Trust to bring to fore a topic that has been debated the world over. Decisions arising collectively from such discussions will change the way end of life care is given. As we know, IMA Ponda Charitable Trust is running two projects, that is Dilasa and Visava. Being involved in palliative care work through Dilasa, many of the members of IMA Ponda are familiar with these topics. This forum, however, brings together luminaries from both the medical and legal fields to exchange views on this subject. It is a privilege for us to have amongst us here Honorable Justice of Goa Bench of Bombay High Court, Justice Mahesh Sonak sir, who has kindly consented to be the chief guest. I also thank sir for visiting our both the project and appreciating them. We are honored to have with us a very senior advocate, Advocate Nitin Sardesai, who readily agreed to be the guest of honor. He will be speaking on the legal aspects of euthanasia and living will. The keynote speaker for today's program, the one who actually initiated the idea of this program, is Dr. Roop Gursahani, consultant neurologist at PD Hinduja Hospital, Mumbai, a well-known figure in palliative care circles with a passion for advanced care planning, who will be guiding us on the medical aspects of euthanasia and living will. We have Dr. Rajaram Mamre, Secretary IMA Ponda, our State President Dr. Mohan Dumaskar, our State Secretary Dr. Sandeep Naik, Chairman of IMA Ponda Charitable Trust Dr. Santosh Usgaonkar. We are indeed grateful to the members of this august gathering, doctors, advocates, eminent personalities in society representing NGOs who on the eve of this festival season have dedicated this evening to be a part of today's discussion. The overwhelming response that we got for this program is proof enough of the weightage these topics have in people's lives today. I welcome you all once again and wish you all an evening of fruitful discussions with lots of conduct and take home. Thank you. Jai Hind, long live IMA.
Thank you, Dr. Dilip. I now request Dr. Purnima Madam to present a bouquet to our chief guest, Justice Mahesh Sonak. Dr. Shweta to present a bouquet to Senior Advocate Nitin Sardesai. Dr. Samida to present a bouquet to our keynote speaker, Dr. Roop Gursahani. I request Dr. Smita Udgamkar to present a rosebud to our beloved State President, Dr. Mohan Dumaskar. And Dr. Vandana Patankar to present a rosebud to our Honorable State Secretary, Dr. Sandeep Naik. We acknowledge certain luminaries in the gathering. Dr. Anupama Borkar, Professor and Head, Oncomedicine. I request Dr. Purnima to present her with a rosebud. Dr. Shirish to present a rosebud to Dr. Asha Savadekar, Director of Sanjeevan. Dr. Rana Bakle to present a rosebud to Dr. Shirish Borkar. He is HOD of Cardiothoracic Department of Goa Medical College. I will take pleasure in presenting a rosebud to Dr. Shekhar Salkar, the clinical head of Manipal Hospital, Goa.
I call upon Dr. Purnima to present a roadmap to our senior architect who is present over here, Sri Kamlakar Sadle. He is doing a lot of work in the senior environment. Thank you.
Dignitaries on the dais, Chief Guest of today's function, Honorable Justice Mahesh Sonu, IMA State President Mohan Namaskar, Keynote Speaker Dr. Rup Bhushan, Senior Advocate Nitin Sardesai, State Secretary Sandeep Naik, other dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. Media person, my colleague, and admission and invite. Honda IMA is involved in the charitable activities since its inception. It is somewhere in 1974. In year 2005, IMA Honda Charitable thought of having IMA Honda Charitable Trust to have charitable activities reaching every corner of Goa. So the far-fetched benefits in the community will be achieved. When we thought of the palliative care was in infancy. It was only a 0.1% of the people were getting the palliative care. Later on, when we started the unit, it came about 1% of the total population who deserved the pediatric care were getting it. In Goa, when we started the palliative care, it was 4% of the people were getting the palliative care. Altogether, there were 4,000 children and adults require the palliative care in Goa, and only 4% were getting it. Later on, when we entered into the pediatric field, and started admitting the patient, initially the response was quite poor. Later on, as the year passed, we found that more and more people are getting admitted. At present, we have got 22 admissions out of 25 beds, almost occupancy to the tune of 95%. We wanted 3 aims in mind when we started. Admit the palliative care patient, which require a palliative care, and make an awareness of the palliative care in the society, which we could do, partly, may not be total. Dilasa works in 3 ways. In a OPD, we handle the new cases, we give them counseling of the disease which they are suffering, and also the progression of the disease is told to them. So dropouts are minimal, and the fear of the disease is also curtailed. People who cannot attend a hospital are given the home treatment. Home care is given on weekly basis or if needed in between. Admission is done under SOP when we have got a clear thing in writing we get from the referring doctor that the medical treatment, more medical treatment is not required, and only the patient who has got palliative care treatment is admitted. We admit all sorts of patients. Cancer patient, kidney patient, hemiplegia, neurological patient, but he should be in terminal stage, and that certificate has to come from the treating doctor. We have now about 27 staff was working round the clock and giving the service. In my tenure of 16 years, as a chairperson, as nobody was ready to take the chairmanship, we could be two structures. One is Dilasa, a palliative care center, and other is Visawa. Visawa is a media assisted living center for elderly citizens, and it is started and funded by Dr. Kapil from USA, who has settled in Goa, and their aim and thinking was in the same line of IMA Ponda, to serve the people of Goa in one way or other. There are 30 patients can be admitted in that, and all facilities which require for the aged will be given, and even the daycare facilities are available. Ambulance is by standby, and if anybody wants a transfer to a hospital in a serious condition, once the patient is stabilized, he will be taken to the hospital. For these 16 years, I had been working with the other trustees to achieve certain goal, which I find we have achieved to a certain extent, as we have been awarded 3 national awards at the IMA conferences. Other, we have received social recognition from the other community as well. Where we lack basically is a OPD attendance. Palliative care starts once a disease is diagnosed. Supposing we diagnose a case of cancer, there is always initially the patient do not accept it. Then there is something called a fear and anger, and then there is a depression. We should catch the patient before it goes into depression. So it is mandatory for any patient who has got the cancer to attend a palliative care and take a counseling from medical social worker and doctor. Because sometimes the physician or a treating doctor does not have that much time to counsel the patient, and dropouts are always there. I thank all my trustees who have been with me all the times for handling in difficult situation and giving us the present situation what we have got. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Shankar. May I now request all the dignitaries on the dais to light the traditional lamp. He was born on 28th of November 1964, completed school education from Don Bosco High School, Panaji, BSc from Dempe College of Arts and Science, LLB from MS College of Law, Panaji, Goa, affiliated to Bombay University in first class, Portuguese language diploma awarded by Xavier Center of Historical Research, enrolled as an advocate on the rolls of Bar Council of Maharashtra and Goa in October 1988 and practiced at Panaji bench of the High Court of Judicature, Bombay in civil and constitutional law, labor and service law, environmental law, commercial and tax laws, company law, and public interest litigations. Additional Standing Council for Central Government, Special Counsel for State Government and Statutory Corporations, elevated as Additional Judge of High Court of Judicature at Bombay on 21st June 2013. May I now request our chief guest to address the gathering.
Dr. Dilip Kerkar, the President of IIT Ponda, Dr. Rajaram Mamre, Secretary, our esteemed guest and keynote speaker, Dr. Roop Gursahani, Senior Advocate, and my dear friend Nitin Sardesai, distinguished doctors, advocates present here today, and my dear friends. Thank you very much for this invitation. This community sensitization program on the all-important topic of euthanasia, ethics, and living well was necessary, and I am so glad that you are having this program in Goa. Frankly, I feel that we have all avoided speaking on this topic for far too long. After I received your kind invitation with the program overleaf, I was quite relieved to see that my talk was not scheduled in the program. I thought I was only to be a part of the panel discussion, but then Nitin invited my attention to the fine print which referred to the chief guest's address, and so here I am, tasked with delaying you all the pleasure of hearing two eminent speakers, Dr. Roop Gursahani and Senior Advocate Nitin Sardesai. I'm quite sorry about that. If after some time you all feel sorry about that too, then Dr. Kerkar, please accept my advance judicial directives to pull off the microphone. Friends, in fact, I agreed to come here for two reasons. First, to confess and do something about my complete unpreparedness of the end-of-life scenarios that have the potential to unfold mostly without any advance warning. Secondly, it would not be an exaggeration to say that I was literally dying to hear our keynote speaker, Dr. Gursahani. Apart from being a great neurologist, Dr. Gursahani is an even greater crusader for the cause of sensitizing and disseminating knowledge on this topic of, I would say, medico-legal importance. In Common Cause, that is a decision of the Supreme Court in 2018, our present Chief Justice of India, Dr. Chandrachud, has extensively referred to Dr. Gursahani's work and his 2016 paper, India, Not a Country to Die in. So a combination of an eminent doctor and an eminent lawyer, Mr. Nitin Sardesai, in today's function, and I would say a generous blend of doctors and lawyers of the days, is, I think, a very healthy cocktail on this, thank God it's a Friday night evening. So therefore a dash of a judge, like a dash of some salt and pepper, becomes a little tolerable. Friends, doctors, lawyers and judges do not very often meet in pleasant circumstances. But today we are a part of a mission, a social mission, a noble mission and an essential mission. A mission that would help us all and perhaps help us to help many more in addressing these life and death issues that are inevitable and unavoidable. Therefore, congratulations to IMA Ponda Charitable Trust for conceiving and delivering this workshop. Thank you very much. Today I am here to be enlightened on this important topic. Mahatma Gandhi always advised that we should live as if we were to die tomorrow, but we should learn as if we were to live for an eternity. But unfortunately, we tend to reverse the order and feel nothing about postponing these all-important matters. As judges and lawyers, we have acquired the notoriety for postponing everything. As members of the medical profession, I need not discuss with you the difficulties of reaching to any decision. You know that making a decision is never an isolated venture. It involves taking responsibility for that decision. And that is the most difficult part of any responsible decision making. Therefore, they say that the duty of a judge is to render justice, but her art is to delay it. But with doctors, it can be different. Generally, as patients, we all rely on your skills to postpone our reaching the destination from where no traveler ever returns. But today we hope to discuss how good such postponements are once the point of no return is reached and pointless pain and suffering are the only sure companions till the final destination. As sensations diminish in intensity, the sense of vitality fades. The desire for life gives way to indifference and patient waiting. The fear of death is then strangely mingled with a longing for a repose. Doctors are trained to keep their patients alive as long as possible. Their Hippocratic oath binds them. It says, I will not give a lethal drug to anyone if I am asked, nor will I advise such a plan. Therefore, perhaps not many doctors explain or even discuss how to prepare people to die gracefully, to die with dignity. And yet for many patients, particularly those that are old and terminally ill, death is not a question of when. And death is a question of when and not if. Should the medical profession rethink its approach to them? And if they should rethink, in what way should they rethink? And if the medical profession is prepared to rethink its approach, is the legal profession geared up to back this approach? Is our present state of law equipped to deal with these issues? Are there any judicially manageable standards to effectively deal with these issues? Is it not high time that the legislature steps in? The philosophical questions apart, there are real practicalities that call for meaningful discourses and discussions if we are to expect any broadly acceptable solutions. With aging populations, medical innovations focus on dignified living and not merely survival. The hospital costs spiraling uncontrollably, these questions become increasingly relevant. This invite, I must say, prompted me to attempt some reading on the subject. I was fascinated to be introduced to Oliver Sacks, V.S. Ramachandran, Atul Gawande, and of course Robin Cook. I read a delightful essay by Bertrand Russell just this morning. It was written in 1934 on the subject of euthanasia. Such clarity and such force. A small essay, 2-3 pages. Dr. Gawande has written about the doctors of the death chamber, describing the experience of doctors who were only called to witness the executions, but somehow got involved in the procedures little by little. I'm so happy that Dr. Asha Savardekar is present here today. She, some years ago, presented me with her beautiful small book titled Peaceful Exit. She writes about the moving interaction between the great Dr. Christian Bernard and his 78-year-old patient, Ilyas Khan. All this reading only whetted my appetite for more. But whatever I did manage to read only gave me a fair idea of the magnitude of my great ignorance on this all-important subject of life and death. My presumptuous presumption that I was a fairly literate person truly met its Waterloo when it dawned on me that my death literacy was quite pathetic. I did not even know that there was so much to know about this all-important subject. Perhaps I was, like so many others, simply running away from reality. I was, I must say, in a perpetual denial mode, basking in the false security that ignorance is bliss. This invite was therefore a clarion call, and I genuinely thank you all for this. The little that I managed to read on the internet told me more and more about Dr. Gursahani's great contribution, his great compassion, and his even greater passion for spreading death literacy. I am not much tech savvy. In fact, I am digitally challenged. But whatever I read about Dr. Gursahani on the internet told me how the Supreme Court of India had to turn to him and rely on his expertise in deciding Aruna Shanbag's case. I read about Dr. Gursahani's stellar contribution to the national discourse on euthanasia and the importance of every person executing a living will while able. I have greatest respect for the medical and legal professionals. This respect is greatly enhanced when such busy professionals take time out from their busy schedules and share their wealth of knowledge and experience in areas of their expertise with others, and that too in simple words. This is what Dr. Gursahani and Mr. Sardesai are here to do today, and we can all be nothing but grateful to them for this. So frankly speaking, I am not here to share my views on today's topic, but I am here to listen to the eminent speakers along with you all on this important topic. Friends, I think it was Robert Frost who said that the world is composed of two kinds of people. Those who have something to say and unfortunately can't, and others who have nothing to say but keep on saying it. I must confess that typically I belong to the latter category. Today I will try to resist, but this resistance is not very easy for me. In consulting rooms of doctors, which at this age I have to frequent quite often, I am mostly told what I should not do. And in courts, lawyers keep telling me what I should do. So a captive audience of lawyers and doctors is a potential payback time. But then there is this advanced judicial directive of pulling off the microphone plugs, and that should keep me in the check. Friends, given my present vocation, I rarely have the luxury to raise questions and then go away without answering them. Usually, whether right or wrong, I have to perforce answer the questions that litigants, mostly through their lawyers, raise before me. Typically, two sets of lawyers present opposing arguments with equal force, leaving me with the difficult task of deciding which of the arguments is less evil and which mistake is a safer bet. As in medicine, certainty always eludes us. In most of the difficult matters that come before a court, no judge can be certain of his or her infallibility. Even our Supreme Court is not final because it is infallible. But the Supreme Court could be regarded by legal fiction as infallible because it is final. Our Constitution provides no appeals against the Supreme Court decisions, but perhaps deeply conscious of the vulnerability of our institutions, there are reviews and even curative petitions. I am sure today's speakers would talk to you of how Rathinam was explained away in Gyan Kaur and how Aruna Shanbag was partly overruled in the Common Cause. In fact, recently, on an application by the Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine, the Supreme Court modified some of the guidelines issued in Common Cause. These are all Supreme Court decisions on euthanasia and advanced medical directives. In law, perhaps as in medicine, nothing is certain. In fact, they say that the only thing certain is death and taxes. But as I said earlier today, I have the luxury only to raise the questions and leave it to the eminence of the speakers to supply the answers. On the issue of advanced medical directives or the living will, the controversies are very few. Broadly, there is conceptual clarity, at least regarding the theoretical aspects. I have no idea about the practical aspects or the difficulties experienced in the implementation of these directives. A broad-based consensus is reached or is reaching on the issue of passive euthanasia. However, active euthanasia or legally assisted suicide are still very controversial or sensitive issues. The discourse continues, and I think it must continue until some medical, judicial and legislative consensus is reached. Euthanasia is defended on the principles of autonomy and choice. This is my body. Who is the government or the society to dictate how I should deal with it? When dying cannot be avoided, let us be passionate enough and tolerant enough to respect choice. This is not an issue of right to die, but this is an issue of right to live with dignity. These are the arguments pro-euthanasia. Now, the famous Oliver Wendell Holmes, in one of his addresses, quoted a line from a Latin poet who uttered the message, "Death plucks my ear and says, 'Live, I am coming.'" This is the significance of living. But when a patient really does not know if she is living till death visits her, and there is constant suffering without any hope of living, should one be allowed to wait? Should she be cursed to die as life gradually ebbs out from her being? Should she live because of innovative medical technology, or for that matter, should she continue to live with support system as people around her think that science in its progressive intervention may bring about some innovative method of cure? To put it differently, should she be a guinea pig for some kind of an experiment? The answer has to be an emphatic no, because such futile waiting mars the pristine concept of life, corrodes the essence of dignity, and erodes the fact of eventual choice, which is pivotal to the right to privacy. Now, passive euthanasia is accepted on the premise that there is no point in prolonging a patient's suffering once the medical opinion has certified that a point of no return is reached. Then on the same premise it is argued, what is the logic in excluding active euthanasia? The euthanasia supporters argue that the patient's best interest principle must be extended to legally assisted suicide or even administering a lethal injection to put an end to the patient's pain and suffering. It was the great Napoleon Bonaparte who famously remarked, he says, death is nothing but to live defeated and inglorious is to die every day. Now these are all very weighty arguments. On the other hand, there are counter arguments. The sanctity of life doctrine, the Hippocratic oath by which the medical professionals swear to do everything within their means to save a life unto the last. There are arguments about prognostic uncertainty and misdiagnosis. There are problems about what is really the patient's best interest. Would not the hospital clinic costs also cloud the decision of the decision makers? Could it not be that the relatives opt for a speedy exit, not because it is in the patient's best interest, but maybe to save costs, or worse still, to speed up the inheritance of the patient's property? Then again, there is always the usual slippery slope argument. Once we permit active euthanasia, we are bound to slide down the slope, and we may be powerless to resist other inevitable consequences like elimination of the disabled, the weak, the infants, and so on. The slippery slope arguments often point out to the horrific consequences of the Nazi philosophy of eugenics and the predominance of the master race. Peter Singer warns us pithily that once we adopt a system that permits the killing of patients, we will not be able to limit the killing to only those who want to die. The right to die can so easily become an expectation to die, and finally even a duty to die. All these arguments and counter-arguments do not always admit of easy solutions. There are questions raised on whether it is appropriate for the judiciary to rule on such matters. Are there any judicially manageable standards to deal with these life and death issues? Are these not issues of ethics, philosophy, and they are best left to moralists or philosophers so that some consensus evolves and the legislators are comfortable coming up with some legislation that perhaps could have some degree of acceptability? Now, legislative history shows that Euthanasia Regulation Bill of 2019 was proposed by a private member, that means a member of the parliament, but not sponsored by the government. And this was to give a statutory basis to advance medical directives and to regulate the life of persons who are in a permanent vegetative state or terminally ill or facing unbearable suffering. But it was a private member's bill, it really did not take off. Before that, there was a proposal for the medical treatment of terminally ill patients, Protection of Patients and Medical Practitioners Bill of 2006. Now this was aimed to provide protection not only to patients but also to medical practitioners from the liability in the context of withholding or withdrawing medical treatment, including support systems from patients who are terminally ill. There was also the 241st report of the Law Commission of India, where they sought to review their position on euthanasia. But none of these legislative measures have gone through as yet. These sensitization programs will help to dispel the fictions that often parade like facts in these areas. These sensitization programs will face the facts and different viewpoints objectively before the people. These programs will go a long way in building public opinion. These programs will assist the legislators in taking a stand rather than simply tolerating the status quo. Most people tolerate the status quo simply because they have no courage to pilot a change. Piloting a change involves assuming responsibility, and most people dread responsibility. One such facts and figures, viewpoints and counter viewpoints, arguments and counter arguments are objectively placed before the people, I think some consensus is bound to evolve. The solutions will surely not be foolproof, but solutions would be far better than those grudgingly offered today. Friends, I genuinely think that democracy is based on the premise of giving competent adults complete access to relevant information on a subject and then trusting their ability to decide for themselves. Friends, I am conscious that I have taken enough of your time, the time that you had legitimately reserved to hear our speakers, Dr. Gursahani and Advocate Nitin Sardesai. They have much to say on this subject. It is said that wise men speak because they have something to say, and fools like me speak because they have to say something. So once again, I thank the organizers for inviting me. I thank the distinguished audience for bearing with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Justice Sonal, for those enlightening words. I request Dr. Dilip Kerkar, President of IMA Ponda, to present a memento to our chief guest on behalf of members of IMA Ponda and IMA Ponda Charitable Trust.
Well, let me take this pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ruth Gursahani. Dr. Ruth Gursahani is a consultant neurologist at PD Hinduja Hospital, Mahim and Khar, Mumbai. He is the board of directors for International Neuropalliative Care Society, course director, International Neuropalliative Care Certificate course. His main interest is in epilepsy and neuropalliative care.
I'd like to begin by, first of all, appreciating the incredible effort that IMA Ponda has put in. I mean, this makes you literally unique amongst the various IMA branches. And of course, I have to thank Dr. Daimodkar for inviting me to speak. And I'm really impressed by Justice Sonal's the fact that he took the trouble to read up so much about what I do. Right. So, I'm not really going to be speaking too much about euthanasia. There. What I'm going to be speaking about is basically advanced care planning. I'm not sure if you can see this from the back. The first panel says, Janma Mrityu ab महंगे हो गए हैं, सीज़ेरियन के बिना कोई आता नहीं और वेंटिलेटर के बिना कोई जाता नहीं. And on the other side, this is obviously India. On the other side, you have this from my Twitter account. Somebody is writing about how his grandfather passed away today, and last night all that he wanted to do and which he got was to have beer with his sons. He could do it. Can you think of that happening in India? No. In India, what we do have is this elderly couple who literally asked the president for a helicopter to evacuate them to heaven. They said, send us a special dispensation for euthanasia. And in the UK, advanced care planning at the same time was being advertised on buses. If tomorrow everything changes, leave no doubt. This was on a double decker. Okay. But the biggest worry for all of us is dying with pain and suffering. And Woody Allen said it best. He said, I'm not afraid of death, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Right? And the interesting thing is that India is far ahead of the rest of the world in digital finance, not too far behind in communications, and even in medical technology, we are just about a couple of years behind. But we are 4 decades behind in how we handle death and dying. Why? And after January 24th this year, I actually said that in one day we had advanced 2 decades. Really. So think of a trip. Would you like to plan it? Would you want info, travel, stay? Once upon a time I could jump into a bus for Goa, not worried about where the restrooms are on the way, whether I'd get food on the way or not, where I was going to stay. That doesn't happen now. I want everything sorted out well before I start. So the last journey of your life is, the destination is fixed. And you really have to decide what the experience of that journey will be. And when people are asked, and this is actually, there is documented from a paper by Dr. Priya Kulkarni from Pune, one of your mentors. 90% of us want to die at home, but the reality is across the world, 70 to 80% end up dying in hospital. So it's important for all of us to understand how we die. Now, sudden death is actually quite not very common after the age of 50 years, and it's easily understood. People do risky things till the age of 50. If you survive 50, you're probably sensible enough to go on for a bit more time. And in fact, you have to have a lot of punya to die the way our long-haired president died, literally lecturing students. And he was gone. The next trajectory that we need to understand, which actually affects a little less than 20%, is cancer. Typically, it affects people in their 60s. And these are people who start off their illness at a fairly high level of function. At some point, cancer biology takes over. And then they have this, what is being called the waterfall trajectory, in which death is, the prognosis is fairly predictable. Go on a decade more, and people who had various kinds of diabetes, blood pressure, other chronic illnesses come up with kidney, heart, lung, liver failure. This accounts for a little under 20%. And we call this the looping or the entry-re-entry trajectory. They get into a crisis, never come back to the same level, and then eventually pass away during the crisis. If you remember the earlier picture, Manohar Parrikar literally was in his seat till a week before he passed away, and apparently fairly sensible. I'm not sure if it was a week, but it was not a very long time before he died. What about Vilasrao Deshmukh? He actually ended up dying in a hospital in Chennai waiting for a liver transplant. I'm not sure that he or his family understood that he was so close to death. And what about Atal Bihari? So about 50% of us, those of us who reach our 80s, will hit what is called the dwindling trajectory. You enter your 80s at a low level of function and you keep dwindling down. This is the old age, frailty, dementia trajectory, and you remember that Atal Bihari Vajpayee was not heard of after he lost the election till he passed away in 2018. We really didn't hear anything from him. And then there is this artifact of modern critical care, and that is somebody who is hit by a truck, a bullet, a bomb, whatever, and is rescued by critical care. Most people die, but a fair number remain with severe disability. This probably is a very small figure, but it has an outsized impact. It's about 5 to 10%. So I guess you understood the point I'm making, that for about 90% of us, death is predictable. Some weeks, months, maybe a little longer before it occurs. And so, if we look at the requirements for a good death and the barriers, they become pretty obvious. The first is to know when death is coming in, to understand what can be expected, because everybody needs to have time to say goodbye. But the problem is that we are not willing to talk about death, and that actually loses us the opportunity to settle our emotional and psychological accounts. And this is not a problem that was recognized recently. It's one of the Yaksh Prashna in the Mahabharata. greatest wonder, day after day, countless creatures reach young, yet those that remain behind believe themselves to be immortal. Sometime after that, it also, in addition, in India became Apshakur. So you added our natural reluctance to confront death together with a societal bar on discussing it, say, across the dining table. So, if we require a good death, we require control, dignity and privacy, because you need to be sure of how the last days will be managed. But our systems do not permit patients and families to take control. And doctors are scared of making decisions, so the default option is just go on. Pain relief and symptom control, well, we have poor systems for this, and you do not understand how lucky you are. I mean, how lucky our patients are in South Goa that you have access to a world-class palliative care facility. So think of the last journey of your life. Who has the information, who is planning, and whose responsibility is it to plan? Well, foreseeing and foretelling were always the doctor's responsibility. Most of us accept that. Except that when you need to deliver bad news, it has to be done honestly, accurately, but also spun optimistically. And this is a difficult triad if you are not trained in communication skills, which unfortunately till recently most of us were not. So most doctors' policy tends to be don't ask and don't tell. In that sense, the ball is really in the patient's court. And then comes the question of who's planning the last journey. You, someone you trust, or the default mode is that nobody is planning. And in fact, that is the worst. Because unless there is planning, suffering cannot be minimized. If you plan, palliative care can help. But it needs to be recognized and planned. It must be understood that if you can speak coherently, you decide, and your choices and decisions will always come first. But can you decide right till then? Not really. When somebody begins to die, we call it the active dying process, which takes about hours, days, maybe sometimes up to a week. And once that begins, people become delirious and they have no ability to communicate coherently. So in cancer, this happens days to weeks before death. In somebody like somebody in organ failure, every time they swing down, they lose that capacity, perhaps they come out. And in dementia, they lose it for a decade before they actually pass away. And that brings us the question of what is autonomy in this kind of a situation where you do not have that capacity. Logically, I have the right to determine my own future. Justice Sonal spoke about that, to accept or decline any therapy, and to actually to decide who decides for me. But is this absolute? As a Western concept, yes, it is absolute. Every man, every woman has that complete right. But in Asian societies, we accept what is called Swadharma, which is more bounded by our relational structures. So we cannot make these decisions on our own. We have to go with what our families and our society decide. But when you are making this decision, probably the first decision is to think of who will make the decisions for you when you cannot. So ideally, we have to identify three decision makers. They don't work as a committee. They obviously talk to each other, but at each given time, if the first is not there, then the second is not there, then the third. But one person and one person alone, like a single judge sitting on a bench, has to make that decision. The next decision is the location of care. Hospital, well, I don't know of a single intensivist who wants to die in his own ICU. Think of it. It's a horrible place. Lights on constantly. There's continuous noise. You can't sleep in an ICU. And there are strange, masked people doing painful things to you. Right? Not a good place. What about a hospice? Yes, that is a place that is guaranteed to work at making you comfortable. But as I said, most people would prefer to have the services of a hospice at home. The next choice is what we term life-saving treatments. These are CPR, artificial respiration, IV fluids. Artificial tube feeding, the RICE tube is a life-saving treatment. Dialysis and chemotherapy, you understand. Now, in many patients, these do save lives, but in many others, they only prolong the dying process, and the patient has the right to refuse any or all of them, and this is now the law of the land. I'll come to that point. I'm just going to speak a little more about cardiopulmonary resuscitation. For those of you who are not doctors, you would think, you would have realized, you would have thought that cardiopulmonary resuscitation is like in TV serials or the movies. Somebody falls down, somebody else bangs their chest, and 5 minutes later, or by the next scene, that person is walking out. That is not the way it happens. It is a rescue procedure. Unfortunately, when it is done to an elderly person, when you look at the results 1 year later, only about 10 out of 100 are alive. And in somebody who's old and frail, it is a brutal procedure. It usually breaks the ribs. You can hear the ribs cracking. Not something that I would want to have done. So is it possible to pass away comfortably at home? Well, here are a couple of examples, and I'll show you them in a little more detail. Just remember that Jimmy Carter has already said that he's never going back again to hospital. He's in his 90s. The Bushes, George and Barbara Bush, passed away comfortably at home. So for all of this, we require some amount of legal documentation, and the first is, the most important, is the living will. But unfortunately, it needs a process and a system to make it effective, and it requires debt literacy. This system is called advanced care planning. It's a process to guide decision making about your healthcare, if and when you do not have the capacity to decide for yourself. Now, you have to look at it as a kind of an umbrella term for all the various concepts that have come in under it, and there's a lot of history to this. The advanced directive is what we will discuss a little further. It began as a living will, and then the healthcare power of attorney was added because it was realized that not everything could be written down in a living will, and you needed an actual brain to think what would be right and what would be wrong. But some decisions can be very clear-cut, black and white. One of them is the do not attempt resuscitation. Do not intubate is actually not the same, and we need to understand that. In the US, you have something called POLS, Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, which are much more elaborate. We don't have that. And remember that the organ donor registration is also part of the same decision making. Advanced care planning actually has to begin with a conversation between the person, because they're not always patients at that time, family, and power of attorney for healthcare providers, and this often needs conducting by a trained facilitator or counselor. Whatever is the outcome has to be documented, and you need a system to see that this is acted upon. So if anybody is interested, I strongly recommend looking up the Conversation Project. If you want to have these discussions at home, this is in English obviously. I know there's a project on with Pallium to convert this to Indian languages, but at the moment we have to go by the English versions. When do you do it? Trigger events are obviously a new bad diagnosis, hospitalization towards the later years, or changes in care needs when somebody who's able to go around independently suddenly has to be restricted to home. But as has been said about the estate will also, it always seems too soon until it is too late. So basically anytime. Would you do it for somebody who's healthy? So let me give you my two poster boys here. Barack Obama made his living will towards the end of his first presidency. Why on earth would a young man who was not yet, he was just about short of 50 at that time, why would he do that? One reason is because the US president has an occupational hazard of being shot in the head. What about Michael Schumacher? He went through his racing career, accumulated millions of dollars or pounds, and then he had that stupid skiing accident where he literally just toppled over while skiing, cracked his skull, and never walked again. For 3 years, he literally wasn't seen. Even now, he's badly crippled. He never thought of this. Anyway, so anyone who's concerned about the possibility or is concerned enough to do something about, say, catastrophic brain injury, even though it is rare, yeah, this is something that one needs to think about. So my example is this lady who I know, who feels very strongly about organ donation. If she's ever seriously brain injured, and she has an advanced medical directive that incorporates this, and she keeps updating it. What about people who are a little older, where illnesses have already begun? Say somebody in their 60s, I'm 64. This is this patient of mine who had a massive brain hemorrhage. And in fact, when she first came in, I had actually told her husband, let her be. He said, no, I want her back home. She got operated, her life was saved, the tubes came out, but she's completely paralyzed on the left side. She's still alive. She's able to feed herself, but nothing else can she do. She needs help with every other basic activity. And her husband broke down once in front of me. He said, she keeps asking me, why did you have me operated? Even a brother, when he landed up the next morning, he was a doctor, he said, why did you have her operated? My daughters have said they will take care of her when I am not there, but right now I am all alone. So, her sister, retired government servant with diabetes and blood pressure, recovered from an episode of ischemic heart disease, very quickly said, I want to make sure that my wishes are noted. And funnily enough, she said, I don't want my husband to be my power of attorney. It will be my best friend and my 2 sons. Well, everybody makes these choices. So what happens when the end is near and survival of only 1 year is expected? This is something that if we use our prognostic skills, and unfortunately it's like the third eye of Shiva. You don't want to open it, but there are times when you have to. And when we do that, you see a patient like this. This is a 80-year-old gentleman who has lung disease, COPD. He needs oxygen. But he also wants to attend his granddaughter's wedding, which is planned a year ahead. So his A&D specifies that if he needs ventilation, he will be put on the ventilator, but with a time limit of 3 to 5 days. If his heart ever stops, he should be allowed to go peacefully. This is the kind of detail that people can put into their documents towards the end of life when things become clear. Now, in case you are not aware, the DNAR, Do Not Attempt Resuscitation, is a document that has been published by the ICMR. I was on the team that did this, and this is a valid legal document. You do not have to wait for Narendra Modi to come and tell you do it. This is something that we need to actually incorporate. What we don't have is something that is much more elaborate, like the physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment that they have in the US, where multiple options are provided, and these are put into these luridly colored forms, which people put all over the place. Typically, one copy is always on the fridge under the magnet, so that if somebody finds you unconscious, they can look at that and follow your instructions, which have been countersigned by a doctor. So they are effectively a doctor's orders. And whoever is the person who follows that order is protected because another doctor has signed off on it. Similarly with the DNAR, remember that a doctor has to sign off on it, together with the patient or the surrogate. So the advanced medical directive basically has 2 components. One is the proxy decision maker and the guidance for the proxy that we now call the living will. So what type of life, what level of care, what you hope for, so on. This is the basic document that is available at Pallium India, Indian Association of Palliative Care, multiple sites. If you just type in any of these, living will and any of these, you will get this document, but it's a relatively basic document. And this obviously, as I said, has to be part of the conversation, which is used if and when you lack the capacity to be your own decision maker. Remember that for those who are outside conventional family structures, being able to actually appoint a healthcare power of attorney is quite crucial, because you don't want to be at the mercy of somebody who you've never agreed with. And there is one protection in the whole process, and that is, even if you're totally confused, even if you're delirious, you have to be asked whether you accept the living will that you had made. And even if that confused state you say, no, put me on the ventilator, you have to be put on. So you can change your mind, and that can be done orally. But obviously, making it has to be a written process. So coming back to this point again, remember that for 90% of us, death is predictable some weeks or months before it actually occurs. And I'm going to again remind you that US presidents seem to manage this very, very well. How did I get involved? Well, late on a Sunday evening in 2011, a call from Justice Kadju put me on this duty on the Aruna Shanbag case, which Justice Saab has spoken about. And over a period of some time, I got drawn into this topic. And I had to read and write about it, and I realized that the judgment had that restricted, it did one thing which perhaps the judges didn't realize, and that was it decriminalized this process. And that was a very crucial thing. Once it had done that, those of us who knew what had to be done at least had that kind of safety. But there were a lot of other things that needed to be done. And this was part of my own realization. One was that as a citizen, I would have no control over my own last days, regardless of this judgment. And partly simultaneously with that, I got involved in palliative care because as a neurologist and as a physician, I really couldn't help my patients till the last. At some point, I had to say, "Ab main kuch nahi kar sakta," which is a sin in palliative medicine. You never say, "Ab main kuch nahi kar sakta." मैं हूँ, मदद करूँगा, संभालूँगा. लेकिन अब मैं कुछ नहीं कर सकता is never said by anybody who's trained in palliative care. So in 2015, 3 national medical associations came together, the intensivists, the palliative care physicians and the neurologists, and we were very fortunate to be able to put together a legal coalition. This was initially held by Advocate Girish Gokhale. He was at that time a consultant with DSK Legal, completely in private work, but he came forward and he put the resources of DSK Legal with us. Eventually, he passed away, unfortunately. But by then, Dr. Dhwani Mehta of Vidhi Legal Policy had joined us, and then Advocate Arvind Datta. These are the 2 people who actually carried us over the finish line. For us, it is important to understand that when the Constitution was written, liberty was a political concept. Religion, this, that. But it had to be brought into the personal space. And there were 3 judgments which came out literally, it was a triptych of judgments which came out literally within the span of a year, all held by 5 judge benches on privacy, health autonomy and sexual choice. And we don't realize that they were literally, they were a common body of jurisprudence. For us, the most important is the one that we are speaking about, the one that was delivered in 2018, the Common Cause Judgment. And I'd like you to read these words, because this is the law of the land. All adults with the capacity to consent have the right of self-determination and autonomy. A competent person who has come of age has the right to refuse specific treatment, all treatment, opt for an alternative treatment, even if such decision entails a risk of death. We can treat them in emergency only when it is not practicable to obtain the patient's consent. But where a patient has already made a valid advance medical directive which is free from reasonable doubt and specifying that he or she does not wish to be treated, then such directive has to be given effect to. Let me tell you that I hear it again and again. What will happen if I listen to this and the 5th son from the United States comes and says that you killed my mother with my eldest brother? That is rubbish. In the US, the maximum amount of litigation is termed wrongful life. When somebody who did not want to be resuscitated is stuck on the ventilator for a month more. Right? We are likely to see that kind of litigation soon. But unfortunately, the judgment that was given had major clauses. The major clause was that judicial magistrate first class was put in as the I wouldn't even call it a speed breaker. It was literally like a tightly shut gate. So, for almost 5 years after that judgment, nothing really happened until in January this year on the 24th, we had our interim application was accepted and we got this. And we now have a due process for foregoing life support treatment. If somebody is on the ventilator, there is a putative process. It is not enshrined in stone, But remember that if you do what is ethically right, if you document it, if you are transparent, there is no way that you can be troubled legally. I can assure you of that. But we are more concerned right now the Advanced Medical Directive, and one of the main features of the January judgment was that it made the AMD valid with just 2 witnesses and counter signature by a notary public. In India, we also had a gazetted government official. And that is it. That's all that it takes to make a valid Advanced Medical Directive. But for it to actually work, you have to actually start talking. And I tell my patients when this discussion happens is that you make multiple copies, inform everybody who needs to know, put one copy up on the fridge, even though, reading an advanced directive and actually doing anything in an emergency is not very easy, but still. But we also need a system. And this is something that is now being worked on, basically through the Indian Association of Palliative Care, an awareness campaign, a model Advanced Medical Directive, which the one that we made is really very simple. We need one which is literally much more foolproof as far as our legal fraternity is concerned as well. We need community capacity building, we need facilitator training, we need support for them in local languages, we need to cover various ethno-religious segments, we need to cover faith-based organization, and more importantly need advocacy with policymakers and legislators, because it's only a law that can say thou shalt not on pain of. Guidelines? What are guidelines? Good. So please understand that we need, but the problem is there is no country in the world that has a complete end of life care law. No country. Why? Because politicians don't want to write death laws. Which politician in power would want to write a death law when they haven't done their best for healthcare? So, unfortunately for Justice Sona, this is going to remain on the shoulders of the judiciary for quite a long time. There are paradigms that make ACP work. I'm not going to go through that. I'm just going to close with this story. 3 famous nonagenarians passed on in 2018 and 1 in 2022. Right? The Bushes died in Darbad in their own beds. In between, one died in April, the other in November. In between, poor Atal Bihari died alone in the AIMS ICU after being there for 2 weeks, including 1 week on ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. Think of it, it's obscene, somebody in his 90s. But that was what happened to him. And Lata Mangeshkar had those vocal cords raped not once but twice. So, my statement to you is, if you're an Indian VIP, I hope you're not, you will be tortured before death. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Your presentation has been a really eye-opener for all of us. And we are going to have more elaborate discussions during the panel discussion, wherein we are going to be the moderator. Now I request Chairman Dr. Santosh Usgaonkar to present a memento to Dr. Burkur Sahab. Now we will move on to the next speaker.
Senior Advocate Nitin Sardesai, he will present his talk.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The chief guest of today's function, Justice Mahesh Sonak, the keynote speaker, Dr. Rup Guruswamy, Honorable President of the IMA Ponda, Dr. Dilip Kerkar, Secretary of IMA Ponda, Rajaram Bhamri, Masters of the ceremony, Dr. Vallabh Daimodkar, and my friend and fellow cricketer, Dr. Ajay Pedekar, Dr. Santosh Usgaonkar, Dr. Dumaskar, Dr. Naik, members of medical legal fraternity, my dear friends, the organizers of today's evening has given me a license to bore you all with law for the next half an hour. And thou shalt do that very seriously. Kindly bear with me. Now, to understand the legal aspect of this concept of euthanasia and living will, we will have to address ourselves to the question, does the Constitution of India give us a right to die? Do we have a right to terminate our life? Now, to answer this question, we in turn will have to turn to some provisions of the Indian Penal Code and Article 21 of the Constitution of India. First and foremost, Section 306 of the Indian Penal Code makes abatement to suicide an offence which is punishable with 10 years of imprisonment. Section 309 of the IPC makes attempt to suicide an offence which is punishable for maximum of 1 year imprisonment. Now, Article 21 of the Constitution is one of the most dynamic of articles. It is very colorlessly worded or very innocuously drafted. All it says is that no person shall be deprived of his life and liberty except by procedure established by law. However, with a huge amount of judicial interpretation, this article has been impregnated by a lot of concepts. The judiciary felt, or the Indian constitutional jurisprudence says, that life is not living an animal existence. Life is not just breathing, but everything that makes life worthwhile living itself becomes a part of life. And that part has to be read in this particular article, though expressly it never said so. So, because of this judicial interpretation, we have had various concepts like right to environment. We can't live a good life with polluted environment. So, right to good environment is your fundamental right. Right to education, right to privacy, right to die with dignity, right to free medical aid, right to free legal aid, and so on and so forth. All this has been read into Article 21. Therefore, the million-dollar question arises that if so many concepts can be read as part of your fundamental right, can't you not read right to die as your fundamental right? Now, if you look at go a few years back, or go back to ancient India, Manusmriti, the authoritative Hindu text on Dharma Shastra, would show that suicide was not frowned upon at all. In fact, our sages, rishis, were supposed to have exalted and reached a higher dimension when they attained samadhi. We have heard about Johar in Rajasthan. We know about the practice of sati. There is something called Santara in the Jain community. Now, all this shows that ancient India did not frown upon terminating one's life. It is, however, the provisions of IPC that came in way. And because of that, concepts like euthanasia was not palatable to the judicial ears. Now, a very interesting thing happened in the year 1971. The Law Commission, after a lot of research, presented a report to the Parliament. And it said that Section 309, which makes abatement of suicide, which makes attempt to suicide a crime, is a very draconian provision of IPC. It should be effaced. The reason is, who commits a suicide? A person who is depressed, a person who is fed up of life. It is such kind of a person who feels that he should quit his body. Now, such a person in fact requires medical treatment. Why should we punish him? So with these noble intentions, it suggested to the Parliament that let 309 of IPC be knocked out of the statute book. Now unfortunately, this could not happen because the report was tabled before the Rajya Sabha and it went to the select committee, and even before it could be tabled before the Lok Sabha was officially dissolved. So it remained at that. Soon after this happened, another interesting happening, a person came to be convicted, that is in Rathinam's case, a person was convicted under 309 for failure in his attempt to commit suicide. He presented a case before the Honorable Supreme. He said that committing suicide or terminating my life is my fundamental right. I have it under Article 21 of the Constitution. So why should I be punished? And in any case, the Law Commission, after the deep research and study, had presented such a report before the Parliament. So why should I be punished? Do not punish me. The matter was heard by a division bench of the Honorable Supreme Court. And they found favor with this argument. They said that yes, we should treat the right to die as a right under Article 21 of the Constitution. Now I may have to just tell why they arrived at this. Briefly I will touch upon it. What they said was, if you see other fundamental rights under our Constitution, they can be exercised in a positive manner as also in a negative manner. Like for example, under Article 19 of the Constitution, we have been given various freedoms. Freedoms like freedom of speech and expression, right to travel in India wherever you want to, right to association. Now all these rights, which are our fundamental rights, can also be exercised in a negative way. Meaning thereby that if I do have a right to speak, if I want, I can exercise it negatively by not speaking. So when you don't want to speak, no one can compel you to speak. Similarly, when you don't want to associate with someone, you can purely disconnect yourself from that association. And that also is part of your fundamental right. Now, if all these rights have got a negative side to it as well as a positive, why only Article 21 should not be read to me? If there is a right to life, there is a right to die as well. And with this kind of a reasoning, the Honorable Supreme Court said that you have a right to kill yourself, you have a right to die. No sooner this judgment came, there was a person, his name was Harbans Singh and his wife, Jian Kaur. They were arrested for having abetted commission of suicide by one Kulwant Kaur. And they were punished for imprisonment of about 10 years. They appealed to the High Court. The High Court did not interfere with that judgment. So eventually they go to the Supreme Court. And they tell the Supreme Court, why am I being punished for 304? 304 is instigating or abetting a suicide. Now in Rathinam's case, the Supreme Court has held that you have a right to die. So if I abated somebody committing a suicide, what have I done? What wrong have I done? I have in fact facilitated that person to exercise his fundamental right. So if that person is exercising his fundamental right, how the facilitation of that exercise can be an offense? Now, the matter came up before a division bench. The division bench felt that the reasoning given in Rathinam's case was flawed. But it could not say so because judicial propriety demands that a coordinate bench, a division bench, cannot overrule another division bench. So now, they were not agreeing with that view. At the same time, they could not say that the view was bad. So So they placed the matter before the Honorable Chief Justice of India. And it is the Chief Justice of India who constituted a constitution bench, a bench of 5 judges, to lay down authoritatively this vexed question of life and death, or whether Article 21 will also have a right to die, which can be read into it. The arguments were heard, and the constitution bench felt that in fact the reasoning in Rathinam's case was faulty. It said that the argument that if you can exercise the negative part of a particular article and you can exercise a positive part also, reading the same in Article 21 would not be correct. The reason is Article 21 is the very sanctity of life. It is a pivotal article. All other articles, all other fundamental rights are in fact derivatives of this particular article, the right to life. So you can't place other articles in Article 21 in one basket. So that itself was a wrong analogy. Secondly, it caught the bull by the horn. And it went by the wordings of the provision, or wordings of Article 21. I will quote that once again for the benefit of the August. It says that no person shall be deprived of his life or personal liberty except according to the procedure established by law. I repeat it again and I take a pause. No one shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty. Pause. Should not be deprived of his life means that you have to maintain life. You have to conserve life. So therefore, extinguishing one's life or terminating one's life, will that not militate against the basic concept of Article 21? So Article 21 can't have a negative side to it at all. One starts when the other ends. Death and life cannot peacefully coexist. They are in fact sole enemies. They can't go hand in hand. And holding so, the Honorable Supreme Court said that you do not have a right to die. But while doing so, it went a step ahead. And this is a very crucial part for our function today. It said that though you don't have a right to die, you have a right to die with dignity. You have a right to live, you have a right to die with dignity. Now there is a fundamental difference between right to die, when you claim something as a matter of right, and when you are not claiming something as a matter of right to kill yourself, but to die with some dignity. I just explain this concept. Right to die, if you want to exercise a right to die, you have to do something very positive. You have to take an overt act to terminate your natural life. That is, you either slash your wrist, jump off a cliff, consume poison. So you are doing something positive by virtue of which your natural life will come to an end. That it cannot be done at all. But dying with dignity is something which is totally different. If you are surviving on the basis of advancement in medical science, if you are surviving on ventilators, if you are surviving on some other medicinal magical products and prolonging your life, if you withdraw that from that patient, then the patient does not get instantaneously killed. He still lives his natural life. He still ends his life naturally with that eventually. But you are not terminating life at all. All that you do is you accelerate the process of death. You fasten that process so that the miseries and sufferings are reduced. And that is what is known as dying with dignity. So this part of Jean Paul's judgment opened the door for euthanasia to be read into as a fundamental right today under Article 21 of the Constitution. Now, euthanasia basically is derived from a Greek term, which is basically two Greek terms. One is EU, that is EU, and stanastas, Eu means good and Stanastos means death. So ancient Greek civilization believed in giving good death to terminally ill patients. They would give them a very peaceful death by administering on them what is known as a poison called hemlock. Now we must have heard hemlock was administered not as euthanasia but as punishment to the great Greek philosopher Socrates. But that was a punishment, that was not euthanasia at all. So although Greek ancient civilization was permitting something like this, doors had not opened in India till this G.N. Kaur's judgment. Now, there was no legislation, even after G.N. Kaur's judgment, there was no legislation as to how is euthanasia to be practiced. Who can enforce it? Under what circumstances it can be enforced? Now, there was one journalist from Bombay, known as Pinky Virani. She was writing a journal on Aruna Shankar, an article or a book on her. She had pity on her plight. Aruna Shankar, on account of an unfortunate event in her own hospital, was bedridden for 36 years. She was in a vegetative state. So, having pity on her plight, she presented a petition before the Honorable Supreme Court, saying that G.N. Kaur says that you have a right to die with dignity. So why should we not withdraw the medical support to Aruna Shankar and put an end to her miseries? Now the Supreme Court was under a constitutional obligation. It was their obligation to enforce the right which was created for the first time in G.N. Kaur's case. But there was no legislation, there was no ray coming from any part as to how is this to be administered. So the learned judges, they took upon themselves the task of formulating guidelines as to how this euthanasia would be administered. And of course, at that point of time, the learned judge said that first, if a person is brain dead, that is his cerebellum or brainstem does not show any electric activity, then such a person need to administer euthanasia. Or the person has to be terminally ill, living on with no hope of recovery. And his involuntary acts, such as respiration, digestion, should be based on account of some medicines or machines. In these circumstances, one could administer euthanasia. But you would have to move an application to the Honorable High Court, Jurisdictional High Court. Now these were all safeguards, and I'll tell you the reason why. The High Court in turn will appoint a team of 3 doctors. That is a neurologist, a physicist, and a psychiatrist. And they will go and examine the patient, and they will really see and find out whether this position which is required to administer euthanasia is actually occurring in that patient or not. And accordingly, you will get a permission or not. In, as Justice Sonal said, that in Aruna Shankar's case, the team of doctors who was appointed to check on this was Dr. Rup Gurusani. And they sent a report. The Supreme Court considered that report and felt that euthanasia can't be administered on Aruna Shankar in view of the report that was presented, though the law was laid down about euthanasia. So now, of course, in the common causes judgment, which comes down much later, most of these conditions have been modified and restructured. Now, the reason for imposing this punishment, these conditions, was that the Supreme Court was wary of the fact that moral standards of our society, Indian society, is deteriorating. So unscrupulous relations may want to declare someone brain dead or a vegetable and want to withdraw the support of machines so that the patient dies and they inherit the wealth at the earliest. So Supreme Court needed to put some check and balances and therefore these guidelines were released. Now, euthanasia per se are broadly of two kinds. One is active and the other one is passive. Active euthanasia consists of giving a lethal dose to the patient and giving him peaceful death, which happens instantaneously. Now, this is not permitted in Indian law. It will be a murder if someone tries something like this today. So we can't indulge in active euthanasia. However, active euthanasia is permitted in some other countries. Countries like Netherlands, countries like Switzerland. Under certain stringent conditions, you can exercise this. Now, passive euthanasia is in turn subclassified in three different categories. One is voluntary passive euthanasia, the other one is involuntary passive euthanasia, and the third category is non-voluntary passive euthanasia. Now, as far as involuntary passive euthanasia is concerned, it is something which is done without the consent of the patient or the family members. This again is not permitted in India. So we are concerned only with two kinds of euthanasia: the voluntary euthanasia, passive euthanasia. Now, under this heading comes what we know as advanced medical directives or a living will. Now, in this, it is an execution of any other will, where you draw a written document. Everything is documented. It need not necessarily reflect to your final stages. You can document what kind of treatment, irrespective of whether you feel that you are going to kick the bucket immediately or not. You can decide what kind of treatment that can be given to you, what kind of the treatment should not be given to you, when such a treatment should be given to you, when should it be stopped. All graphic details can be put in this particular document. Now, there are checks and balances on this also. The Supreme Court says that such a document has to be executed in front of a notary in the presence of two witnesses. They should first certify whether the person executing this document is of sound mind or not. So all kinds of protections have been given. Then where will this document be stored? Who is going to keep this document? The custodian of this document. The document can also foresee that in the event of some treatment being given to you, you slip into coma. Then you are not capable of calling the shot. So you can appoint a person who is going to execute this on your behalf. You can name such person, one or two, does not matter. Then, as Dr. Gulsani said in his talk, that you can decide to even revoke this. One fine day you feel that, well, I don't want this to happen. You can alter it. You can revoke it. You can make a different will altogether. And the law says that if there are two wills, you have not revoked the first one, but you come up with another living will document, then the last will prevail. So that is as far as living will is concerned. And the last is the non-voluntary passive euthanasia, which was the case in Aruna Shanbag's matter, where a person can't take a call. He's bedridden, terminally ill, no chances of recovery, and he's on ventilators or any other modern science which keeps them alive and going. So this is now permitted in law. So to cut the whole thing short, today right to life is your fundamental right. Right to die with dignity is also your fundamental right. Euthanasia can be practiced and it is legal to practice it or administer it. But it will have to be exercised or performed in the manner the Supreme Court judgment, the last Constitution Bench judgment, in common causes says that you should exercise it. Now, with that, I think I may have exceeded my time, but as lawyers, we never take the blame on us. I would rather want to blame you all only for it. For despite of there being so many distinguished doctors in this hall, nobody could control my verbal diarrhea. And so before anything else, I will want to withdraw myself from this amplifier system in your own interest to save your sufferings. And this can be considered as a notice to the High Court also because of the presence of Justice Sonakshi. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
I would request IMA Goa State President Dr. Mohan Namaskar to present a memento to Advocate Nitin Sarkar.
So we have come to the end of this scientific session. Now what we are going to plan is, I will request Dr. Guru Sahib to please come to the moderator. I will request Justice Sonak just for 3 minutes. And please, we will have a short panel discussion. Those who want to ask any questions, the floor is open for discussion.
I think I've been enlightened enough, and we'll just open it to questions from the audience. So, if any of you have any questions, the medical ones, I will answer. Or
what about my LIC policy? How LIC will take this issue? Because if I made a huge, sum, about 10 crores of rupees, and then after that I have some problem, I decide that I want to die early.
this is for the lawyers.
Sorry.
This is for the lawyers.
Shekhar, extremely sorry. I didn't hear what's the question.
So if you have an LIC policy and you decide to go on a ventilator, and while on the ventilator you pull it out, what happens to the LIC policy?
With euthanasia now being legal, I'm sure the policies will contemplate a scenario like this. Because a policy is always a contract between the agency and you. So the contract will provide for something like that.
I have already signed a contract. This has come now.
In which case,
Yeah.
right, as of now there has not been any case of this nature. But I feel that if you are following the law and if you are exercising a fundamental right, then no contract can
If
come
we are
into-
fighting for the LIC, then how you will save me? You will say that
I think you can hire him from the beginning itself.
Thanks, doctor. Meet me later.
Any other questions? Yes, please go ahead.
Small discussion is about elderly persons, but there could be situation in pediatric age group.
So at this moment, all these provisions apply only to adults. And remember that when you are looking at children, their parents are their legal guardians and they make all the decisions for them. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's effectively, this really doesn't apply there. We have a problem. In practice, we have a problem. Because adolescents, and especially adolescents with life-limiting illnesses, mature very fast. And they start to take charge. So we run into this issue and we use the process of assent. An adolescent has to assent to whatever will be done to him or her. The consent will be given by the parents. Please.
What connection? Sorry, I didn't get the-
So the issue was, how does this apply to children?
As far as dealing with,
Yeah, advanced directives and so on.
as far as dealing with is concerned, a person who is a minor may not
Cannot.
be able to take a call on that. But there is always a guardian for the minor who can decide for the minor. And when the minor becomes a major and he still survives without this exercise, he can revoke that and make his own will.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
So, on the eve of this beautiful evening and auspicious day of Dhan Trayodashi, it's my namaskar to everybody. Sir, I would like to address, because this is a different type of thought, and I had a discussion today in the morning at 5 o'clock in the morning at Porori, where about 60 to 70 intellectuals were there. and discussion was on this same thing as far as the yoga is concerned, as far as the Bharat is concerned. So we had a prayer here. That's now Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityurma Amrutam Gamaya. I think this prayer itself tells us and teaches us how to live in this particular world. It is not just for the sake of the prayer. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya. We have to work as if the candle is giving a light to everybody, we have to give a light to everybody. This is what we had a discussion in the morning. And then when it comes to HMSC, I tell everybody, I am a yoga teacher, that once I become a burden to this world, sure I am going to leave this body within 7 days. This is what I am going to tell, and I am telling this, and I tell this to myself. Once I become a burden to this particular universe, I am going to leave this world. So, is it not the very sir, you, doctor, you said about the education of the death? We have to educate ourselves, literacy of the death. Is it not because we are living here each and every minute we are living here? And here, Judge Sonak said about that we have to. It is as if Mahatma Gandhi said we have to live as if we are dying tomorrow. So can we put this into the practice? Because death is inevitable to everybody in this life. We are going to face it. So can we not think of this particular thing and try to take the society in this particular way? It is not our moral responsibility as far as our human being is concerned.
Thank you. Those are very, very valid thoughts. Do we have to comment on this? No, I think you said exactly what we've been trying to say for 2 hours. You said it in 1 minute. Thank you so much.
It's very difficult to talk about death. If I talk about the death, she just doesn't like to listen to that word. If I can't convince my wife here to talk about the death, it's a very sentimental issue when somebody talks about the death. I always tell my consultant that I don't want to die in this ICU when I take the rounds.
Dr. Dhemodkar will organize a course for that.
Yeah, next year, next year IMA, which Olim is going to take up this issue. We have discussed this issue in our state committee also. And next year because we want to first educate the judiciary, because the judicial first class,
I was completely floored by that.
JFMC also is one of the part of these things. Then we have to have the committees in place.
How it is being modified.
Yeah.
But can I, on a lighter note, respond to Dr. Sarkar? And especially when you spoke about your interactions with Mrs. Sarkar, I can share with you my interaction with my wife just today morning, because I told her that I am going to make an advance medical directive, and she wants to also join me in doing that. And I also told her that we have to do the necessary documentation for organ donation, in which movement Dr. Sarkar is a pioneer in Goa and has done tremendous work. So her response was, yes, I think your brain will have a lot of demand because it has hardly been used.
No, but we need to do a lot of awareness about in the medical field also, in the judiciary also, plus general public also. We need to. So next year I think we will take a full year
more, because what I spoke today, it was actually a fact. We are so much involved in our routine that you don't apply your mind to these important things until then it is too late. You always feel that nothing is going to happen for at least a few days, and then I will, maybe when I have a weekend, when I have my vacations, and then it doesn't happen. So I join you wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Ken. Right.
Sir,
Last, I think it's time for dinner also.
Rest of the discussion can go over to the context.
Sir, when implementing this advanced care medical directive, sometimes there aren't such directives. And we as physicians dealing with terminally ill organ failure patients are faced with a situation where there is no scope of recovery and family makes that decision. And beautifully this judgment also talks about the primary medical board and the secondary medical board. So we in Goa want to do that. I just wanted to know if any of the states in India already have this in place.
So, one is of course, even in the common cause judgment, it was very clearly said that people who have not made an advanced medical directive cannot be alienated from the benefits of this judgment. They're very clear about that. So the processes should apply there. As far as the secondary medical board is concerned, see, that is where we expect too much from the judiciary. They cannot write rules. They cannot write laws. I think the Supreme Court has gone as far as they could. Now, what matters, and I'm asking you here, and with these luminaries here, is go ahead and take the lead and write the rules for the secondary medical board. We are ready to support it. We've actually produced draft medical orders. They are probably winding their way through the bureaucracy of Orissa, because that's where we could approach the higher level of the bureaucracy. But if we can do it in Goa, more than happy to do it.
We'll do it next year.
Not next year, tomorrow.
January.
Tomorrow. Can we hand over to the organizing committee and last comments from you guys, both of you?
Yes, we want your comments, then we'll.
Just a thank you and a genuine thank you.
Before Dr. Rajaram proposes official vote of thanks, I think our efforts in having this today's program has really worked out. With more than 1,000 WhatsApp messages, we could get the delegates to the Kingdom 130. I think it's a good success, I feel, and many of citizens who wanted to join today's function due to multiple reasons, they were not in a position to attend. So we have taken the entire live coverage of the entire program, and we are going to have it on the YouTube also, and it will be circulated to the entire community. And with Dr. Shekhar's initiative, this is just a sensitization program in a very small scale. Next year probably, or in the years to come, because this is also a requirement for all those who are running palliative care center, hospice, and old age homes. This is becoming a very crucial moment for us. At times they ask us what is to be done. There were situations at Dilasa where patients really were telling, shall we discuss this? So we said, it is your decision that has to come if I am not wrong, from patients' side. So in such situation, we require a bigger dialogue. And to make the beginning of how this CME came, when I approached Dr. Geeta Joshi, she suggested me three names. And your name, then from Kalkan Sraya, Dr. and Dr. R.K. Mani. So these are the luminaries in this field. And to add to that, if judiciaries from Goa join us, maybe that we can have a program of bigger magnitude in the subsequent years to come, because sensitization is required. Thank you very much. I request Dr. Rajaram.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you is the best prayer that anyone could say, as it expresses extreme gratitude, humility, and understanding. It has been such an honor to be a part of this wonderful event, and it's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. I would like to thank all the honorable delegates who blessed us with their presence. Words are just not enough. However, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to our esteemed chief guest, Honorable Justice Mr. Mahesh Sonak sir, who despite his busy schedule has found time to grace this occasion. My heart fills with a lot of gratitude, respect for distinguished guest speaker Dr. Rup Gursahani, consultant neurologist, Hinduja Hospital, for not only sparing his valuable time, but also for enlightening us with his commendable talk on this sensitive topic like living will and euthanasia. I also express sincere thanks to senior advocate Mr. Nitin Sardesai for clearing all the concepts on legal aspects of living will and euthanasia. Sincere thanks to our co-host, our own IME Punda Charitable Trust, team led by our chairman Dr. Santosh Usgaonkar for their support and commitment. I thank all my senior and junior colleagues for the support, guidance and encouragement, especially Dr. Vallabh sir and Dr. Ajay Pendikar, who have been the MCs of today's session also. Not to forget my support staff for their timely help and cooperation. And last but not the least, I would like to thank all you present here, our distinguished invitees, our IMA state and branch colleagues, advocates, NGO representatives, media friends, Shubhalakshmi Graphic, Hotel Minerva executive staff for making this time to be with us today and helping us make this event a great success. Thank you one and all. Jai Hind, long live IMA.